LinkedIn family. Thanks for joining us on today's LinkedIn Live with Marie Zimenoff, CEO of Career Thought Leaders and Resume Writing Academy. Thanks so much for joining us this morning, Marie.
Yeah, thanks, Cassandra. Good to talk to you again.
Yes, and tell our audience where you're at a little bit and
Well, right now
why.
I'm in Salt Lake City, but we're getting ready to move out of Salt Lake City. So I'm still here, and it's a beautiful day. It's a beautiful mountainous place. So I'm glad to be joining you.
Yeah, and speaking of building on an authentic personal brand, you're there to celebrate too your son's kindergarten graduation, which I thought was really sweet.
Yes, he graduated from kindergarten
How
yesterday, so
cute!
it was cute.
I'm curious. Did you do a post on that? A little picture of his kindergarten graduation. Or
Not
not
yet, but I
yet.
will have
That
to.
would be
Yeah,
fun. Just seeing a little cutie pie with his little graduation certificate. Moving on. Love it.
moving
Well,
on up in the
today's
world.
exactly moving on up now from kindergarten to first grade. Wow. What are they learning nowadays in first grade? Marie,
You
do you
know,
know?
he learned
Or
way
in kindergarten?
more. Yeah, he learned way more in depth in language than I thought he would. Certain types of
Wow.
nouns and adjectives. It's like,
In
wow, that's pretty
kindergarten?
advanced for kindergarten. Yeah.
That is advanced. Good night. Wow. Different. I just remember nap time in
Right.
kindergarten. Mostly.
And
That's it.
snacks. You had
And
naps and
snacks.
snacks.
And like maybe a movie or something, yeah, it was pretty easy going, but not today. Well, I think
Not
that's probably part of our direction that we're going to teach the leaders of the future. So, early on.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, today we're talking about 5 steps, simple steps to building an authentic personal brand on LinkedIn. I'm Cassandra Robinson. I recently pivoted from LinkedIn coaching to copywriting and content marketing for small business owners and coaches, helping you create compelling and clear copy that converts. Um, Please let us know where you're tuning in from. I already see we have an active audience in the chat. We have David from Boston, Massachusetts. Um, I'm sorry, Thaun Hidul. Sorry if I butchered your name, from Bangladesh. We have Argentina, Augusto, Nigeria, India. So we have people all across the world, which is great. Robert from Phoenix, Arizona, and Josue from Mexico. I was just in Cancun a couple weeks ago, or a week and a half ago. So beautiful place. Thanks for joining us this morning. All right. Well, we're here to give you some practical and actionable tips on growing your personal brand on LinkedIn. Um, and we're going to really dive right into it. As a career coach, personal brand strategist, Marie has a wealth of information and wisdom to download on you all today. And hopefully, it'll just boost what you're already doing on LinkedIn if you are already creating content and showing up, or if you haven't yet and you're on the fence and you've been looking at all the content creators behind the scenes, wishing that was you. And that you could break through your fear of what other people will think of you and self doubt and all the other imposter syndrome and all of the other things that we all deal with, and get you to start being more active on the platform so that you can um, experience opportunities and connect with people that you may not have um, before. So, on that note, first step to building your personal brand on LinkedIn, Marie, we have is what is the definition of personal branding? Like, what does that even mean? It's a trendy term and phrase. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, it's funny because I usually hear people talk about, oh, I've got my brand colors or I know
Right.
my font. Or people think that your personal brand is a sales pitch. Like I don't want to be doing personal branding because it's pushy or, I don't want to do personal branding because it's slimy. And
Mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
real personal brand is anything but, because personal branding really is that very depth of who you are and what you bring to every
Mm.
situation that you do, and what strengths and value you bring to everything that you do. So it's very core to who you are. It's not about the spin. In fact, spin is usually hurting someone's personal brand because we all see through
Mm.
it. And so it's really reconnecting with who you are and understanding what you bring to every situation that you encounter.
I love that. So it's like, what's your unique special sauce, for lack of better words, that you bring to every situation, both personal and professional? And how can you position yourself in such a way that you build an authentic personal brand that attracts your tribe and your audience?
Yeah, yeah, and you said earlier, we can be nervous about putting ourselves out there, and
100%.
as we teach classes and do things, it's really something I see in terms of people's evolution, that they open up a little bit at a time. It's almost like, a flower blooming since we're in spring here in the Northern Hemisphere. It's that you get more and more comfortable sharing who you are, and the
Right.
only way to start that journey is to get started.
100%. And sometimes I would say in my personal experience that that's the biggest hump to get over, right? It's just to get started. And oftentimes even my clients ask, where do I even begin? Like, in what social media platform should I choose, and how, and what do I say, and all of that, right? Because our mind is trying to comprehend this whole process of building a personal brand and creating video content and learning software and learning how to write. So there's all these components and elements to building a personal brand, and I won't lie, it does take a lot of time and energy and commitment to growing your online presence. But like you mentioned, keeping it simple and just getting started with, say, for example, an introduction video of who you are, what you're passionate about, and maybe why you're getting on LinkedIn, or what's your objective or goal.
Right, and there was a post going around recently, I don't know if you saw it, Susan Critton, posted that got me to see it, but it was called Career Kickstart, and I'm not sure who
Mm,
started it. I tried to get through all the posts to figure out who started it, but
right,
it
right.
it was just people talking about their first job and, how does your first job play into who you are? And it was a great opportunity for me to kinda get back in the groove because we've had a lot going on the last couple of months, and I haven't posted
Mm-hmm.
as frequently as I usually do. And I thought,
Mm-hmm.
"Well, this is a
Mm-hmm.
great way to reintroduce myself and
Mm-hmm.
talk about kind of who I am and where I came from." So sometimes you can also find those themes, or I don't know what the right idea, the trend that is going on the
Right.
platform. LinkedIn has them, TikTok has them, where you've got those, this is the trending hashtag, and you can
Right.
use that to spark an idea.
I like that. That's a great idea for our audience today. What would you say is a trending hashtag that you've seen as of late, Marie, that someone could maybe jump on and create a conversation that others would find valuable?
Yeah, and you do wanna be careful. You don't wanna pick a
Of
trending
course.
hashtag that isn't that isn't aligned
Great
with your
point.
brand. So, the other,
Great point.
topics that are trending right now are more political, but LinkedIn
True.
tends to kind of put out their own every month in terms of, kind of a theme that isn't necessarily aligned with anything political. I mean, this month,
Mm,
obviously, we've got Pride Month, so if you've
right.
got an authentic connection to that community, that can be, something that you post about. You don't wanna have it be a kind of, you don't want it to be false or fake. People see through
Mm-hmm.
that, or it looks like you're just being, I don't, performative ally. You don't wanna be a performative ally, but it's, if you do have connection to that type of theme, it can be nice. But LinkedIn also
Mm.
usually has some kind of career-related theme that they've got going on, and you can search the LinkedIn editors, or they do have this sidebar that will tell you things that are trending.
Ah, that's very practical. I didn't know that LinkedIn puts out some maybe trending hashtags that the community can jump on and share their authentic connection to. And actually, I'm curious, Marie, what to you defines an authentic connection versus like a disingenuine one, right? We talk about building authentic personal brand and a genuine personal brand, and even that can be lost. And like, what does it mean to be authentic? What does it mean to be me, and to have an authentic connection to these different topics that I'm passionate about, and then create content based on that authentic connection versus, like you said, I'm going to write this to get views or to potentially elicit some kind of a response because I think that it will, but I don't necessarily believe or have like you mentioned, an authentic connection to.
Yeah, and that authenticity piece it's a two-sided coin. So it has to be something that I'm interested in and passionate about. And it
Right.
could be an interest or a passion that I'm developing. So if you've never posted about, Pride Month or GLBTQA plus issues, but it's something you're starting to get more passionate about, that's fine too, because it's still authentic. But it's what are those topics, issues, causes
Mm,
that really get me going, that I love to talk to people about or I love to read about. And that's the one side of the coin. That's kind of the internal side of the coin. But then you do want to consider the external side of the coin, which
mm-hmm.
is your audience. And what do they care about? And how are they going to connect to that conversation? And that doesn't make it inauthentic. And sometimes people think that when we start talking about looking at what your audience cares about, that we're talking about spin, but we're not.
Mm,
It's simply that the best content is really the combination of the two. It's things I'm passionate about, interested in, and also
yes.
the things my audience is passionate about it or interested in, and that I'm sharing it in the language that connects with them. And that's just good communication, right? Good communication is that I talk about things in a way that other people can understand and connect with.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I'm curious for our audience to get some in participation here. What does being authentic mean to you? How are you showing up authentically online? Or how would you like to show up? And maybe you're stuck. And how can we help you get unstuck? So we're here to help you and to give you practical tips to move the needle forward and grow your personal brand. And there's all sorts of different trains of thought or schools of thought on how to build a personal brand, how to show up, what to do, what not to do. But I think, like Marie so thoughtfully shared, that keeping the core and center of your personal brand as authentic as possible, meaning balancing your content between the topics you're passionate about and also that your audience would find value in. And I think that's a great segue into step two of building your personal brand, which is the internal piece, right? We've been talking about a little bit about more the internal piece, your core brand values. Maybe we can discuss a little more about getting to know your audience and the messaging on the internal side.
Yeah. And that is really the place where it takes some time and it's going to evolve.
Yes,
It's going to evolve.
absolutely.
Yeah. So you will sit down and think about what topics or causes am I passionate about? What is really important to me?
Yes.
What do I value? And one of my favorite questions
Yes.
to ask people is like, what do you value about yourself as
Wow.
as a parent, as a child, as a sibling, as a spouse or a partner, as a business person or an
Mm-hmm.
employee? But just to really sit down and think about like what do you take pride in? Um, what is it that you would want people to say
Mm.
about you? Now
Wow.
you don't want to make that, too inauthentic where it's the things you want to be, but it's, who are you and who are you becoming? And what do you value? And how are those values showing up?
Yeah, I love that. And in my experience, a big part of growing my personal brand has been sharing my experience in my journey of faith, my walk of faith, right? My relationship with God. And I know that can be considered a taboo topic along with politics on a predominantly business centered platform. But for me, it was really, like you've mentioned, authentic, right? Like that's genuinely what I'm, most passionate about. And what gets me up in the morning is that relationship, and how does that relationship with our creator affect every other area of our life, including our business, right? And including our family life and really every other area. So making that connection and knowing that successful people on LinkedIn and business owners too could benefit from that as well, and how to integrate it in a way that isn't offensive, because that's not my goal, right? Is the fire and brimstone maybe that we've heard is more of like having a genuine relationship with God has impacted my life, and here's how it could potentially impact yours. And that's been an interesting journey for me too. And it all started with I have no idea like who I was and like what I was passionate about before I got on LinkedIn, or I didn't take time to really think about it. Like you mentioned, it takes time. And when I joined a LinkedIn engagement pod, the group and the coaches in that group said, just be yourself and share what you're most passionate about. And I'm like, but who am I? But who is Cassandra? You know what I mean? Like, really, right? Like, who is this person that I'm with? And what does she value? And how does she want to show up? And I started thinking about what is it that I am most passionate about, and doing some reflection. And of course, the faith thing came up, and that's been a through line for you know um, a big part of my life. And so just sharing from there, not necessarily the intention wasn't necessarily to build a business or online business or even a personal brand, because to be honest, Marie, I didn't know what that was because
Right.
that's not taught in our school system, or at least not yet. So this was just about showing up and being me, and hopefully, the others would resonate with that. And it turns out that it actually did.
Yeah, and after you start to get some of those foundational elements of what's important to you, what do you value, and you start to think about what do I want to be known for, and
Exactly.
how do I select from maybe all those things I'm interested in or passionate about, and what do I really want to be known for? Because if you're
Mm,
too broad or scattered, it's hard to get
great
that
point.
visibility. And so thinking about what do you want to be known for, and then how do those things kind of come together
Mm,
to create your voice? And so, Cassandra, I would say that you've got a very caring, compassionate, obviously spiritual voice and tone about you and what you do. And that's you, right? That's authentic to you.
right.
And that was one of my main struggles actually before I even started getting online. I was getting in front of people in real life. Remember when we used to
Right.
do that? And,
Back
I
in the day,
wait,
you
back in
know.
the day, um, a decade ago now, which is kind of hard to believe, but
That
I
is very
would get
crazy.
up and give presentations, but I didn't know who I was in front of that audience.
Hmm.
And I had a mentor that was very, very outgoing, very loud, very,
Right.
just your kind of stereotypical public speaker. And for a little while, I tried to be her.
For
And oh
sure.
my goodness, did that just flop, right? Because you can't do it that way.
Right.
Um, and so I went to a speaker training, and the woman that was teaching the training, her name is Denise Hedges. She's wonderful. And she was talking about how she said, Marie, you've got this awesome warmth. And I really feel like you care about
Yes.
me, and you want me to be better. You want me to come along with you on the journey and to be
Yes.
successful. She said, you don't have to try to be funny or loud or, extroverted. You just
Right.
be you and show up as you, and people will connect with that. And it changed my whole presentation style, and it made me so much more effective because I stopped trying to be someone else.
And it made you probably so much more confident, right? In showing up as Marie versus as this other person that's extroverted and didn't feel authentic to you. And I'm so glad you brought that up, Marie, because I think that we look at other people and there's traits about them that we do that attract us and we admire. So, we want to like embody that, in a way. But like you were trying to do, it felt inauthentic. But there's a way that you could still show up and be funny. There's funny Marie. There's more quiet, reserved, Marie. There's like all these aspects of our personality that show up in different situations and environments, and how can we maintain that authenticity in each situation, including showing up on video or on camera or online where there isn't two-way feedback and you're just talking to a camera, and then hoping that when you post it, people are going to resonate with it. So it does feel kind of, I mean, it feels awkward. I mean, it is kind of awkward, talking on video and just imagining, this audience. But when you're really passionate about the topic that you're talking about and have that authentic connection, I think it does make it that much easier and also more fun and enjoyable.
Yes. And figuring out what are those topics is really
Exactly.
powerful. And I do think it takes some iteration. So you start talking about some things, and I have people like brainstorm, what are the topics you're passionate about? And then what topics do you think would be most, I don't want to say appropriate, but would be the best for you to start with, depending on the platform
Mm,
that you've chosen and your comfort. So some people may not be comfortable talking about certain topics right away, and that's
mm-hmm.
okay. Just getting started and figuring out what is it that you are comfortable with, and then you can build on that, and it's going to evolve as you go along. One of our students in the digital branding class just wrote to me and she said, I'm going to be late with my homework because I've been going to some in-person events, and as I've been having conversations, I've realized that my focus, my topics are evolving a little bit. And
Yes.
that's so true,
Yes.
as we get feedback
100%.
and hear from our audience, we say, okay, this topic, it's sparking something in me as well as sparking
Yes.
something in the audience.
Yes. And how would you recommend that our audience even start to consider what topics that they're most passionate about and to start authentically posting about those? Like, oh, I have a million things that I could talk about, Maria, or I have zero things. I don't really know what I'm, passionate about. Like, what are some coaching questions maybe that you ask your clients to get that started? And you've shared a few, but would you like to add anything else?
Yeah. So what are they reading? And
Uh,
I don't know if you get this one in the chat, but like, what conversations do you love to have with people? Uh,
mm,
what the reading thing can really help, or listening, if you read or listen to podcasts or whatever
mm-hmm,
your method of engaging with content is. What are those places that you already get
mm,
content that you can build off of? I don't necessarily want you sharing all the time, because shares get lower views on all the
right.
platforms.
You're
And
right.
although it isn't about views, I hate for you to be sharing content and be like, well, why am I not getting any views? So you can
Yes.
take that article or that video, get your own ideas around it, put those
Yes.
ideas in the post, and then link to the place that gave you the inspiration. But you can link to it in the comments. You actually can link to it in the post, but you just don't want the preview to come up. So if I'm going to
Mhm.
send you
Right.
to, Cassandra's blog, I don't want the
Right.
preview of her blog to come up, because that just
That
triggers
makes
people.
sense.
Yeah, it triggers us and we kind of scroll past it. But I could say, I read this great blog. I could tag
Sure.
Cassandra and then put
Yes.
my own spin on it, my own take,
Yes.
and then link to it so that she gets
Yes.
that. You build your credibility, you build your relationship with the person that you're sharing. And so that's a great way to get started for people, is what are you already reading? What do you think about
Mhm.
it? And then post about
Exactly.
your thoughts and then link to the resource.
I love that, and I'd love to ask our audience the same question. What conversations do you love to have with people? What things are you already interested in and that you're doing research on a daily basis, even Googling, and things that you find yourself just lost in because you enjoy learning about it so much? Or um, what gets you up in the morning and what gets you excited. Even I found that love and hate are both strong, right? But what do you have even dislikes for around? Like, what do you disagree with, right? In the world, the injustices in the world, or both can be just the passion, I think, whether it is something that you disagree with or really appreciate that can lead to great content. And there's a way to write and speak about potentially controversial issues in a way that does evoke respectful conversation without coming off as abrasive or um, exclusive.
Well, and that kind of brings us to this idea that I think a lot of us are afraid of, if I post something, then, the trolls are gonna come out, right? The
Sure.
trolls are gonna come
We're
out,
going to come out the woodwork. Yes, yes.
right? And I would say, so I recently had this experience, and unfortunately, even though I know this stuff and I teach this stuff, I had let it kind of dim my light. I had said, "Okay,
Mm,
I see these trolls coming, and I'm gonna back off
mm-hmm,
a little bit because I don't have the
mm-hmm.
emotional energy right now to deal with the trolls," right?
Right. I
And
can
so I backed
understand
off
that.
posting a little bit because I could see the trolls coming, and guess what happened
Mm-hmm.
anyways? The trolls came
I
anyways.
was just
Even
about to
though
say, yeah,
right.
they kept
Even
coming
though
anyways.
I had
Yeah.
backed off, the trolls came anyways, and
Yeah.
guess what? I did not die. I'm still here.
Yep. Exactly.
And really the
Guess
only
what?
person hurt by the fact that I backed off is me, because I
Right.
didn't continue my stuff, and the people
Right.
that I wanna help, because I didn't continue
Wow.
providing value to them. And
Mm,
so I think it's much easier to say, obviously, much easier to say than to do, but almost no matter what you do, if you build visibility, no matter what topics you do, how
mhm,
well-cited you are,
mhm,
people
mhm,
are going
mhm.
to try to take you down. It's just our
Right.
unfortunate human nature, and especially in
So
our
true.
society right now. Um, and that, if you let that stop you, it will
Mhm.
only hurt you and the people that you wanna help.
That's no, I love that. Good morning, David. Thank you all for joining us. Again, we're talking with Marie Zimenoff, CEO of Career Thought Leaders and Resume Writing Academy, about how to build an authentic personal brand on LinkedIn. Whether you're an avid user on LinkedIn or you're currently on the fence, we're here to provide practical and actionable tips to growing your audience and your personal brand to unlock opportunities that you may have not dreamed possible. And we are on step 2, the internal, and we've kind of talked really through all the steps, but to continue moving on in the conversation, step 3 is the external piece of building a personal brand. What do you have to say about that step, Marie?
Well, it kind of builds on what we were just talking about,
So
into
true.
terms of, who do you want to help? Who do you want to,
Mm,
um, who can you help? And that, to me, is what helps when we're in the stuck place, or it's a cycle, right? I don't know if it's a roller coaster is the right idea, but um, it is kind of a roller coaster, because at some points you'll be doing great and you'll feel really empowered and passionate and confident about your content. And then something will happen, maybe even personally,
yes.
and you will feel less confident about posting, or maybe,
Mm-hmm.
a post doesn't do well, and no matter how much we try not to take that into account, it does, we can get
Very
down
true.
on that. And so when you're in those valleys,
Mm,
what gets you going is, you can help people, and you are the only one with your voice. You are the
wow.
only one that can say it in your way, and somebody needs to hear what you have to say in your
Wow.
way, in your voice, because yes, they may have heard it before. There's really nothing new
Mhm.
out there,
Mm. Great
but
point.
that doesn't mean that they don't need to hear it from you.
And Kimberly said, Marie Zimenoff, don't worry about the trolls. You provide great insights to those who want to learn. The trolls often don't want to learn. Remember, strong brands both attract and repel. You attract givers because you are one. Keep doing what you're doing. Very sweet. Do you
Thank
know
you, Kimberly.
Kimberly?
Yes.
Oh, so sweet. Thank you for the support, Kimberly, and thank you for that thoughtful comment. So true. I love that strong personal brands both attract and repel. And I couldn't help but think of course, one of the most influential leaders. I think the most influential leader in the world is Jesus Christ, right? He had a very strong personal brand, and he had, stood for something, and it repelled those he came to speak to, right? Because it was so against their concept. But he didn't waver in that. He knew what his will was and what his purpose was on earth, until death, right? He stayed true to that. So that is a great point, that trolls or people that just don't want to learn or don't have an open mind or a growth mindset. I would say the Pharisees didn't have a growth mindset. They had a fixed mindset. This is the way it's done, and this is the way it's always been, and you're coming to rock the boat, and I can't process that. I'm not open. I'm not open to that. And that's okay, right? Like, it's okay that there's some people that won't like your content. They aren't open to, what you have to say, and that is okay. You can continue to love them at a distance, and respect their position, but staying true to who you are despite that.
There you go, the original trolls.
Yeah, true. It's so
They've
true.
been around for way longer than online, right? There's always people that
Very
want
true.
to take that contrary position, that aren't
Right.
ready, as you said, that aren't ready, or they just believe something different than you. Although
100%.
I don't believe we have to take other people down just because we believe different than they do. I actually think it hurts your personal brand if you take that personal dig at other people. I would encourage us that if we have a difference of opinion with people, like you said, you can write posts that talk about what you disagree with, but we need to write those carefully in a way that is collegial and, that does leave the door open for further conversation, and in a way that talks about what you believe in your story, not necessarily the other person is wrong or bad, or, we get into all of that kind of judgment piece, and it is not our place to bring that type of judgment, especially online, where it really doesn't do any good, right? You're not gonna, Taylor Swift song, no one's been less gay because someone threw shade at them, right? It just doesn't
Love that.
happen. And we have to think about that we can disagree, we can share our point of view, but stick with your point of view and your story, why you believe what you believe, where you're coming from, what your background is, instead of trying to take that other person down for whatever it is they're saying. And if I think that someone is saying something that's incorrect and may be harmful, then I reach out to that person offline and say, I'd love to hear where you heard that, or what data is behind whatever you're saying, because I'm not going to assume that they're wrong just because they
Right.
have a difference of opinion. I
Right.
really want to understand where that is coming from, so that I might continue to grow and continue to educate my audience. And what I found is that sometimes I am wrong. Like, I did a poll, maybe almost a year ago, I did a poll about whether or not people thought you should put years of experience in that, like, first part of your resume, because I've
Right.
never loved
Right.
it. It just felt so commodity, right? Everybody's got 10 plus years of experience.
Totally.
And so I've said, don't do that. Well, what I learned in my poll was that a lot of recruiters do think it is important to put those years of experience in there. And so I changed my approach to talking about how you do that in a way that
Mm.
doesn't sound like a commodity, instead of
Mm.
telling people not to do it. So if we don't explore those differences of opinions, we can't learn and we can't grow.
I love that. There's so much in what you just shared. One particular thing that stands out is we're not often taught how to think. We're taught what to think, right? Even growing up in society, like, this is what's right and this is what's wrong. This is, how you conform to society and how you become successful. So I can see why it's challenging to formulate thoughts and ideas around topics that you are passionate about, and considering, who am I and what am I passionate about, and how do I want to show up? Oh, what do I want to be known for? All those really reflective questions that we often just don't set aside or carve out time to consider. So, like you mentioned, Marie, like, considering what are my thoughts about this topic, like personally, just from personal experience, from my background, from my upbringing, because no one can invalidate that perspective, right? Because it's your personal perspective and experience. No one can say like, "Oh, that's not right." It's like, actually, that's my experience. That's my view, right? And being able to stick to that, and like you mentioned, having conversation in a way that's collegial and also like respectful, even if it is totally different. And I often get messages from people of uh, the faith, the Islam faith, right? And wanting to correct me about who Jesus Christ is, that he's a prophet and not the Son of God. And, that's obviously very different. It's a completely different perspective. And well, I don't believe that, right? Like this is my belief. And by messaging me, it's not going to convince me or, other another way. And that's okay, right? Like, I see that maybe they're where they're coming from, and responding in a way like, thank you for sharing your perspective. This is my belief as a Christian and who Jesus is, and what matters is having that personal relationship and revelation, however you come to that.
Yeah, and you're going to get those disagreements, and I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's a very foundational belief,
Right.
right? And
Exactly.
and how can you learn from each other and
Right.
and
Exactly.
have those different beliefs, but you still have the same values? You
I
have
love that.
different beliefs about maybe where those come from, and what that almighty being looks like, or feels like, but you still have some very similar values and how you want to move forward. And that's one of the frustrating things, I think, that even the media does, not necessarily like the news media, but even on LinkedIn, you'll see sometimes things presented in a way where it's kind of right or wrong. And you're like, well, it's not necessarily right or wrong. It's more,
Right.
it's it's language. Or I even see people do that in the career space where they're like, well, don't target your resume. And like, that's so confusing, because what they're really saying is that you need to have a targeted search so that you're not spending time targeting your resume. You're not
Gotcha.
spending as much time targeting your resume.
It makes
They're
sense.
trying to put out that contrarian view just to get, it's like clickbait, right? They're getting the
Yes.
clickbait, but it's confusing job seekers, and that's not really that helpful. And that same thing happened with personal brand. I think it was Melissa, I can't remember, one big famous CEO's at one of her
Sure.
presentations. She said, don't build a personal brand. And then she went on to say, do this, that, and this, which were exactly to build a personal brand. But it was the headline, the clickbait,
Totally.
why is she saying that to build a personal brand? And I get why people do that. And I also think it takes a little bit of oomph out of their personal brand when they do it, because you read the rest of the article and you're like, it's really nothing new, or it's nothing that
Right. I
is as
totally
exciting
see what
as
you're
it
saying.
sounded like. So
100%. It's all about, like you said, getting a rise out of people and clickbait. So that's maybe something to check in too with yourself. Like, how does this post? I heard from another coach. How does this post make me feel? Like after you've written it or recorded the video, how does this post make me feel? Does it make me feel motivated, inspired, or ready to take action, or is it kind of sad or depressing, or because you're going to evoke that in your audience, those emotion, right? You're creating content in order to develop emotional bond with your audience, right? By being your authentic and vulnerable self, you're developing this personal relationship with your audience members. And it is personal. And I understand why it's challenging to create content for so many people, because you are putting yourself out there and wanting people to accept you, to validate you, to recognize you. And that's all, fundamental desires as a human being, right? God created us to be communal beings, that we connect with each other and we have relationships. So that's normal to want that, right? But as I think that you do get that in an authentic and genuine way when you do show up like as yourself, like you said, and don't necessarily create content for the sake of creating content to, like you said, act as clickbait or just to be controversial, just to be controversial, to be really intentional. And this is the type of this is who I even like to be. This is how I want to show up, and this is who I want to be, how I want to be known.
Yes, and it feels that when we share our stories, we also have to think about, why am I sharing this story?
Mm,
What is my audience going to get out of it? And it doesn't always have to be like a lesson, or they're going to get this out of it.
sure.
I don't know if you see this sometimes, where you see a story, especially on LinkedIn, and it's just like, well, hmm. Or
Right.
sometimes it feels very
Sure.
self-serving, and the person may not have intended that way, but I think if we check with our intentions, sometimes we can see, like, oh, I'm sharing this story because I think it might get a lot of views, or I think it might get me a lot of controversy. And if there's not something in that motivation around connecting with your audience, something they will connect with, like you said, are they going to feel motivated? Are they going to feel inspired? Thinking
Mm-hmm.
about how your audience is going to react to that story and why that story will connect with them is so important, because you can tell the same story in a much more engaging way if you're thinking about your audience,
Mm.
versus if you're just telling it in a vacuum, or telling it in a very self-motivated, selfish kind of way.
I I completely agree, Maria, and I think that can be challenging, right? Because I would say for the most part, we are self-serving. We're selfish people, right? We think about ourselves and default there. And I want to add to that in that it may start off that way, right? In your experience when you first start, you're like, I'm just getting over that like insecurity and fear of posting. Like this is kind of self-serving. It's just about me, and and I would say that was kind of my experience. Almost that I use LinkedIn as my like as my blog, almost like as a journal. Like these are my experiences. I don't know if it's going to resonate with you. This is me like trying to break outside my shell and my comfort zone and share about who I am. And I would say, thinking about it, it was self-serving, and realizing that actually content creation is less about you and it's more about your audience, and realizing that showing up consistently and creating content that's both authentic to who you are as a person and also that you genuinely believe that your audience will find value, um, is sacrificial because you're losing face, right? Like you're choosing to show up for your audience knowing, like, you know what, if one person is impacted by this message, then that is enough for me. It's okay. It's not about the vanity metrics, although that can provide, some social credibility and proof, right, as you grow your audience and followers and all this. But having that thought, I had to post it on my laptop for a while. Like, if one person is impacted by this post, don't delete it. Because there would be times when I would go and post and feel so vulnerable about the topic that I posted, like, what, go and delete it. And that I've done that a handful of times in the last 2.5 years that I've been posting on LinkedIn, because I too battle with that imposter syndrome and those insecurities. But just reminding myself that, hey, if one person is impacted and maybe brightens their day or motivates them, like you said, or gets them to think differently, then it's worth it. It's you are kind of losing face, so to speak, by creating content, but for a purpose, right? Not just like you said, in a self-serving way.
Yeah, and that can be really hard for people that are starting to do video,
Oh
or
yeah,
like going live. So I started going
absolutely.
live. Yeah, I started going live every week in February of 2020. So right before COVID hit, I kind of made that
Okay,
that I was
decision.
going to go live every week, because that would be easier for me. So if you're thinking about video, I would make the
Great
little
point.
argument here that live can be easier because you don't have to
It's a
worry
great point.
about fixing it. You don't have to worry about, how do I look, or how many takes
It's a
am I
great
going
point.
to do. You just do it. And when you're doing live video, it's like sometimes it's 2 or 3 people that show up live.
Right.
And that is just, like you said, it's 1 or 2 people that are getting so much value, and they're coming to see you. They're part
Right.
of your community, and you just keep going because that's how you build the community. And you can't build it if you don't start. And any kind of content is the same way. You can't build a community if you don't get started.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a great point, Marie, that there's actual people behind the digital profiles that can be hard to connect to. Like, oh, it's just a digital profile with a static image and a banner, and this is just a digital representation of an actual human being behind that profile. So, like you mentioned, even if it's 1, 2, 3 people, like these are people who are spending time, carving out time in their day. Time is like our most valuable resource, right? To listen to you and to glean from you and learn from you, and that is something to really not take for granted, and to value and realize. Or people commenting on your post, they took time to comment on your post, to write and process what you shared and respond. So just remembering that, because it can be easy to forget, like, oh, I'm just posting and these aren't people. It's just a digital world that we're living in. So remembering that too. It's not just another sale or trying to close the deal. These are human beings with lives and families, and how can we create that develop that relationship?
Yes. And Kimberly, who's been commenting over there. So Kimberly
Yes,
wrote
I
a
love it.
book. Yeah, she wrote a book about 100 conversations that she had. The book's called I Want to Know You. Kimberly, drop the real title in there for me. But that whole idea of meeting people online is the tool to facilitate that. And sometimes I think we forget about that. We just use it as a place to plop our stuff. And we forget that real business, real jobs, real life
Mm-hmm.
is deeper, and the connections need to be deeper. If you're networking to get a job, or if you're networking to build your business, it's
Mm-hmm.
really about those relationships, and the comments or your posts are just the beginning. They're you walking up to someone in that networking meeting and saying hello. And nothing happens if you don't do that. But if you just
Great
stop
point.
there, nothing happens. You just put in all that effort to make a post, and it's just like
Wow.
going to a networking meeting and not meeting anyone or not following up with anyone. You really just wasted that effort if you don't do the follow-up and respond to people's comments and get into the messages and build the relationship with those people. And we talked about this before we got started, Cassandra, that it's not just about building a profile, and it's really not even just about creating content. It's about the
Exactly.
relationships and the conversations that content can start.
Exactly, which is why I started this conversation with your son's kindergarten graduation, right? Because it's a little bit of something we talked about before we started, but it's those authentic stories that realizing, oh, Marie's in a hotel right now because she saw her son's kindergarten graduation. How sweet and special is that? And um, there's people having those life experiences and connecting with them, encouraging them in whatever journey or a season of life that they're in. Um, Kimberly says, "Thank you for the shout out, Marie. That was very kind and giving." It was, because Marie is a kind and giving person. And Kimberly said, "I need to know how to meet ordinary, extraordinary people and improve your life." So that is her book, right? Is that correct, Marie? Okay,
Yes. Yeah.
that's the title of her book, and that book can be found on Amazon. It can be found. Is it an ebook? Is it a book that our audience can purchase? Would love to support Kimberly as well in her work.
Yeah. It is a hard copy book. It's in a box
Awesome.
somewhere now in my life, but I do have it
Right,
as
because
a
you're
hard copy
moving.
book. Yeah. And it goes through the stories of meeting people. And Kimberly, she's a natural connector. And we've already talked about
I
that.
can
I'm
see
an
that.
introverted person and cannot be that natural connector sometimes. So for those of us that struggle with that, having those stories and just seeing how each relationship each person that you meet has so much value. and we can honor that value in the other people. And we have to slow ourselves down, right? We have to slow ourselves down and really honor those people. But we can do the same thing online by honoring the people who like or comment on our content. And I know I see you do that, Cassandra, and I try to make sure I slow myself down to do that, because they're not just a cog in our wheel, right? They are a person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I love this question from Erica. It's so practical, right? How do you work through the fear of being seen? And also, thank you for that shout out to Kimberly. You're awesome. I'm glad that you joined us this morning. Really blessed us with your awesome engagement and participation in our conversation. So, what would you say? I know we're coming to the end of our hour, but I'd love to take time to answer this question that Erica thoughtfully commented on.
So I would say start with the topics that you're comfortable, and those may just be professional topics at first, and that's okay. Not all of us are that comfortable on the personal side. When I first started thinking about what I was comfortable with on Facebook, so this is kind of funny. When I first started on Facebook, I made this little goal that I was never going to send a Facebook friend request, because again,
Wow.
I'm introverted, so having a huge network is overwhelming to me. It's scary to
Yes,
me. And
I
so I
understand that.
started out like I was not going to invite anyone, and I was going to be very thoughtful about what I post. So I would post about sports because I'm a big sports fan. I'd post
Love
about
that.
Rotary, and I would post about careers because that was my professional passion. And so I chose those topics that I was
Love that.
comfortable with, both professionally and a little bit
Hmm.
of personal, like the sports and some of those things. And that's how I got started, was just starting with a little world and a little sprinkle of personal, so that I had more comfort in sharing. And it is one of those things that the more you do it, the more it grows. And I took a pause recently, as I said, because I've had a lot going on. And boy, it's hard to start opening back up again, even though I had been doing it. So it's really about that
Totally
consistency. But
agree.
to get started, I would just choose those topics that you're most comfortable with and find a little sprinkle of personal, whatever that might be. That's your personal hobby, your personal interest, so that people can see you a little beyond the professional.
I like that. I hope that helps answer your question, Erica. And that's a great way to start. Like you said, Marie, just like what topics are you passionate about and how can you sprinkle in your personality and show up? It's so much more like fun and enjoyable to talk about topics that are close to home for you and that feels easeful versus like forced. And also, I'd like to add to that too, Erica. Like we all have different insecurities and things that maybe we don't like about ourselves. When I think of being seen, I'm assuming that you mean like via video, um, uh, actually being seen, and you might we have all we're our worst critics. We're on our worst, enemies, as they say. That like when we get on video, oh, my hair or my voice, or there's something I don't like about myself, and it's easy for that inner critic to take over, and then we're like, forget it, I'm not going to post that video, I'm not going to even do this thing. But just I it just helps to realize that, like you've said so beautifully before, Marie, that there's people that it can be impacted by our story, and by sharing our story and realizing that content is really for our audience and to help people improve their lives and their experiences. And by showing up and realizing our story can be a page in someone else's survival guide really helps to shift the perspective, like from yourself, like self focus, right, to your audience and who you might potentially impact and connect with. And also realizing we are beautiful and we are created in God's image. And sometimes you need to be your own hype woman or hype man. And even before this, like live, I looked at myself in the mirror. I'm like, you got this, Cassandra. Like, let's go, girlfriend. Like, you have so much to give the world. You're awesome. Like, so just having those, even mirror work. There's a book out there. I think I forgot who it's by. Is it Louise Hay? Mirror work. It's an actual thing too. You can look into it. Just about having those conversations with yourself in the mirror and loving the person that you see, and encouraging yourself before you make a post or write a post or get on video or whatever it might be. Just something like, it might sound silly, but it does help. waking up every morning. I know a very popular LinkedIn influencer, Lacey Abashi, she says that every morning she says to herself, in the mirror, like, you're a badass and you got this, like to really conquer her day, so whatever that might be for you, that you need to um, exercise that self-love and affirmation to be okay with being seen.
Yes, yes. And there is someone out there that needs your help, and by playing small, you're preventing that person from getting what they need. And so
Mm-hmm.
flipping it on that side of
Right.
things, like if you play small, then people that need your help, people that need what
So
you and
true.
only you can offer aren't going to get it. And I love that reframe for myself, again, taking outside of myself and really thinking about that I do want to make an impact. I do want
Yes,
to help people,
exactly.
be happier in their career. And so when you find that passion or that mission, flip the script, if you will, and let that drive you. So there's a few
I
questions
love that.
about kind of getting started. And I would recommend
Yes,
at least 3 times a week on LinkedIn. You don't have
I'm
to
with
post
you.
every day. The algorithm has actually shifted to have this kind of tail that once you post, it takes a little while for it to get going. And so if you
Yes.
post every day, your posts actually can kind of diminish each other. So especially if you're just getting started, 3 times a week at the time that works for you. And if you're not getting engagement on your posts, consider
Mhm.
how you could ask a question that is
Mhm.
easy for people to answer and helps build their personal brand. So especially on LinkedIn, people
Mhm.
don't want to be vulnerable in their comments most of the time.
Very
So
true.
start by asking questions that people would want to answer, or that they could use it to share their personal story, their
Mhm.
expertise. And if you ask some good questions at the end of your posts, you may get some
Yeah.
engagement. And you don't have to do it every post, but try some different types of questions and see if that will get some people engaging on your posts.
Yeah, that's a great point. So I did, to answer your question, start out with, well, we all start out with one follower, however many connections before we started showing up consistently. And I agree with Marie that you don't have to post every single day. I know some people do, and that's another school of thought. But 3 times a week, at least 3 times a week, is preferable. And maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday to, like you said, let the algorithm kind of boost your content and get it going. And then also ask a question in the comments section, and maybe tag 5 to 7 creators or other thought leaders or people in your network that you feel like this post would find relevant. They would have something of value to add to the conversation, like you said, to increase the engagement. Also, but I would also like to add to be thoughtful when you tag people and not just tag 30 people in your network just for the sake of um, trying to increase your visibility, because it'll more than likely do the opposite, and people will be like annoyed, like, I'm just part of this 50-person group or 100 people that you tagged, and there's not a lot of like thoughtfulness behind it. So I encourage you to remember that as well.
Yes, it actually hurts you if you tag a bunch of
Exactly.
people that don't respond. So thinking about that, getting the conversation going, asking a question, bringing in people that, again, could also benefit from engaging on your post is a great way to build your community and build your relationships while building your visibility and theirs.
Exactly. It's all about a mutually beneficial relationship and connection, right? Like, as if you're wanting people to engage on your content, doing the same to others. And I know that we're at time, and we touched on the last step, which is visuals. So I want to just quickly, touch on that. What visuals make sense to create, and what is your audience going to connect with? And I think this is a piece that people really, like you mentioned at the beginning, what are my colors? What is my font? Like the visual piece of building your personal brand. Could you add something brief to that, Marie?
Yeah, so visuals are usually engaging when they include people and they're not promotional. So you can do a promotional visual every once in a while.
Sure.
You've got an event coming up or whatever, but most of the time visuals are engaging when they're either sometimes an infographic, like a how-to guide or whatever, or a person, a picture of a person. Those are the two things that I see engage the most on LinkedIn. So if
Very
you've
true.
got somebody that could help you turn your article or your podcast into an infographic or a short
Mm-hmm.
slideshow, those work really well on LinkedIn. But don't, that's something you can build into. If you start with content only posts, just writing, that's perfectly fine. And then you can build into the visuals later.
100%. So don't let that stop you from creating content, all the visuals, and like, oh my gosh, I don't have all my visuals or my branding colors and fonts yet. You can even just take a stab at Canva, which is a great resource to create, slide shares and, other visuals that might just help increase your engagement with your audience. And you don't have to overthink it. Honestly, even to this day, I bother my husband to take pictures of me, my personal branding pictures, my personal brand photographer, and just go out and take some photos because like Marie said that, people want to see faces. They like to see faces and, connect your written post to a person. And again, it's just that psychological and emotional connection with a human being. So don't overthink it. If you have a friend that can, is willing to take your photos and you can take them out for lunch or coffee or whatever, like make it as simple, like make this whole process as simple as possible for yourself because it can be overwhelming and so you don't get started. So I want to encourage you all listening to make it as simple as possible for yourself and as fun and enjoyable because this is a long-term game, right? This is not an overnight thing building your personal brand. It's not like, oh, forget it, no one, commented on my one or two posts, like I quit, like, no, you have to really think about it, like at least stick to it for 90 days, 3 months, posting 2 to 3 times a week, engaging with your audience. I'd say carving out at least 5 to 10 hours per week, which is 1 hour a day. Let's say Monday through Friday, it's 5 hours, right? You're on LinkedIn for 5 hours, creating content and engaging with your community at least to grow your audience. It is a commitment. You get what you put into it, just like anything else in life, right? And to realize like it does take patience and time and consistency to grow. So I hope that encourages you all to, in whatever stage or phase you're at in building your personal brand.
Yay. Yeah, and it does take
Yay!
time. It does. It takes time. And
It really does.
just keep going and
Yeah.
stay connected. And feel free to tag me on your posts. I'm happy to come
Yes.
comment on your posts as well if you're
Same.
just getting started, and find your community and focus on building those relationships.
And Marie, where can our audience members find you? How can they connect with you? Of course, I'm sure on LinkedIn, any other social media platforms or websites that you'd like to make mention of?
Yeah, so careerthoughtleaders.com is our home for the career services providers that we're building our community. My community is career services providers, coaches, and that's where I live. We are on, Instagram, Twitter, but I do spend most of my time on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. I do have my follow button turned on, but feel free to click the more and send me a connection request.
Love it with a little maybe add a little note. That always is a nice touch when I get. I tend to accept those first, than without. And also, what do you have any programs or courses that are coming up that our audience can learn more about what we're talking about today, right? Building your personal brand, and if they'd like to go through like a structured program or course to give them something tangible and the fundamentals of growing their online presence.
Yeah, so we'll have our personal branding course again in September. We don't have the registration up for that yet, but we will soon. And then we'll do our digital branding program again in October. We're about to launch our storytelling program next week, which is a little bit,
Awesome!
yeah, it's a little deeper. It's more for writers, but
Wow,
we love that course as well, just getting into how do you help people tell their stories. So if you've got
I love that.
storytellers out there, feel free to reach out to me and then watch for our personal branding courses that will come up this fall.
I love that. And I took the personal branding course, so I can speak to that, how great it was. Susan Critton, also a personal branding, master. And She had some great information and questions to really get you to dive in and do the work that we often put off or don't do, which we've been talking about throughout our time together today. So you can get to know who you are and your core brand values and how you want to show up to the world and what's your freak factor, which I really I really liked that. I think it's so different, and what sets you apart, and how you can show up in an authentic way. So I'd highly recommend that course if you're looking to if you're just researching programs and looking for a way to develop a holistic personal brand. Check that out. Coming in September. Anything else? Marie, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I look forward to connecting with some of these folks that were engaged on our. Thank you for commenting, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you all for taking the time out of your Friday morning to hang out with Marie and I. Hope you guys got so much value. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask Marie or I, and we'd be happy to support you. And like Marie, Marie Forleo, she always says, at the end of her podcast, because the world really does need that special something that only you can give. So that's just a reminder for you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Have a great weekend. See you next time.